Welcome to Magic Arcanum. I'm Ryan Gomez. Behind the scenes is Nicole Letson, and we're so glad you're here because it's story time. Commander Legends gives, well, legendary cards to dozens of characters, some brand new and some longtime favorites from the Magic story. There's a couple I found particularly interesting though, so for today we're going to look at my allurable picks from the set. I'll start with the familiars. There's 5, one for each color, and they all have the partner mechanic, which means they can act as a sort of co-commander along with any other partner card. The idea of familiars goes back to medieval European folklore, where it was believed witches had pets that were actually supernatural creatures who helped them perform their magic. We've seen familiars in the game plenty of times over the years. Cauldron Familiar had his paws all over Standard until he was banned, but you can still use Lull Mage's Familiar to help you cast your kicked spells over on Zendikar. And while owls are a popular type of familiar, we've also had things like zombies, dragons, imps, and bears too. Joyra even built her own mechanical bird, which helps her in her work, and that is a great example of how a familiar is supposed to function in real magic. As real as folklore can be, anyway. So, what is special about these familiars from Commander Legends? Well, they each came with a short biography that deliberately avoided mentioning what plane they are on. That means we get to speculate, and my guess is they're on the same plane as the School of Strixhaven. It would make sense that the students and professors there would lean on familiars while studying or teaching magic. Falthus even looks like she might be in a library of sorts. The biggest stretch is Kelith because her story mentions knights and you wouldn't expect to find those at a school, but I did say in my predictions video that I expect the White School of Strixhaven to be one focused on paladin type characters, so it could still fit. Overall, I think the familiars are really cool and a great use of the partner mechanic. In fact, I kind of wish this is how companions had worked back on Ikoria. Maybe make it so you can only summon your companion if you already control a legendary creature, and then it grants some extra abilities or effect to that creature as long as they're both around, and then it behaves a bit more like the familiars caring about commanders. Anyway, I could redesign cards all day, but we are here to talk about my allurable picks from Commander Legends, so let's get back to it. One of my favorite cards in the set is Nevin Yeral, Urborg Tyrant, because the most interesting part of his story actually comes from outside of Magic. You might recognize his name from the Commander staple Nevin Yeral's disc, which was originally printed in the game's very first set. What you might not know, though, is both cards are named after a real person, and that's author Larry Niven. They just spelled his name backwards to create a tribute character. Niven is perhaps best known for his Ringworld series, which are excellent science fiction books, some of my personal favorites, but he also wrote fantasy stories, and one of them had a profound impact on the creation of Magic the Gathering. That would be the 1976 short story, The Magic Goes Away. In it, a character named Warlock realizes mana is a finite resource, and all of the magic users of the world have been so reckless with their spellcasting that they are now on the verge of running out of mana worldwide. Warlock came to this conclusion after devising a simple test. He created a small metal wheel, I think it was made of copper, and he enchanted it to spin forever. Doing so would require constant mana, so Warlock observed, eventually, the wheel stopped spinning, which confirmed all of the mana in the area had been drained by the test. Warlock also realized by traveling to a new location, he gained access to the mana there, so as long as he kept moving forward, he didn't have to worry about running out. All of this had a huge impact on our beloved card game. Mana, the source of your magical powers, comes from land, and you have to constantly explore and find new lands to tap for your mana. The disc is a direct reference to the original Warlock's Wheel. Using it wipes the board, and effectively puts an end to anything that was powered by mana. You can still find The Magic Goes Away on Amazon. It's part of a larger collection of short stories. I'll put the link down in the description, so check it out and let me know what you think in the comments. Anyway, nearly 30 years after getting the disc, we now get its creator in-game with the Urborg Tyrant. He predates the Ice Age on Dominaria and was a powerful Lich Lord until he made the mistake of trying to expand his empire by attacking a place called Bogarden. The Bogardans defeated the zombie army and then counterattacked with their own Hellkites. Realizing he was beaten and not wanting his collection of powerful spells and artifacts to become treasures for anybody else, he then used the disc to destroy everything within a 10-mile radius. Yep, that's the official lore. 10-mile radius. I'm sorry, metric system, but even undead wizards don't calibrate their artifacts according to your standard of measure. Anyway, Lysa, Shroud of Dusk, is another card from Commander Legends, and I have to admit, I kind of missed this one at first. Black and white angels seem to be most common on Ravnica, so I had assumed that's where she was from. But reading her little biography revealed she's actually way more important than I had realized. Turns out she's not from Ravnica, but from Innistrad. She's the missing sister to the original guardian angels of that plane, Bruna, Sigarda, and the other one. For years, players have wondered why this cycle was incomplete, and now we know. These four protected the humans of Innistrad from the plane's threats, until Sorin created Avacyn. Avacyn didn't like the way Lysa consorted with the monsters rather than fight them. You see, Lysa thought by understanding the dark forces of Innistrad, they would be better equipped to eventually defeat them, but Avacyn wasn't having it. So ultimately, Avacyn destroys Lysa, and that all happens well before we get our first look at Innistrad. That's one of the cool things about Commander Legends. They can show us cards from any point in time without worrying about how it would fit into the current storyline. So yeah, Lysa is now long gone, but we get a card that shows her in her prime before Avacyn arrived and replaced her in the skies over Innistrad. These are fun, and since Nicole would not let me end the script after just 4 pages, let's keep going. Abomination of Lanawar. Longtime fans of the show might remember Lanawar Elves is Nicole's favorite card, but that is not why I wanted to bring this one up. Lanawar is a huge forest on Dominaria and has been a part of the Magic story since the game's very first set, but every so often we learn something new about this mysterious region. For instance, back in the Dominaria set, we met Shalai, Voice of Plenty, and we were told she is the guardian angel of Lanawar. That's why her activated ability uses green mana while she's a white angel. It's easy in world building, especially in fantasy settings like Magic, to make the mistake of painting with too wide of a brush, let's say. Lanawar is the big forest, so it has elves, it has tree folk, they are green. All of the spells from here are green. This is Magic's definitive green experience, right? So when they add something like a white angel who has a strong connection to what is effectively a mono-green region, it reminds us that these places do not exist in isolation. They bump up against each other. Lines smear, colors bleed. That makes the world of Magic a more interesting and dynamic place, I think. Now, I know Shalai is not the first example of this. Elfheim Palace and Lanawar Night have given us white before, and Lanawar Wastes has suggested a darker presence within the Great Forest. Which brings me back to the Abomination. Apparently, growing within Lanawar was a dark magic, and when a scout troop of elves touched it out of curiosity, it swallowed them up. Then a second group came looking for the first, and they too were nearly all consumed by the fused corpses of their fallen brothers. And now the legend of the abomination persists. It has become a Lanawar Boogeyman, a campfire story told to remind the elves that while they have mastered much of their own forest, there is at least one thing out there that should still scare them. I guess while we're on the topic of scary things, we can look at Tormod the Desecrator. You might recognize his name from the card Tormod's Crypt, which was originally printed in a set called The Dark. It has since, however, been reprinted many times, including this year in Core Set 2021. Tormod's story was a bit of a mystery until Commander Legends, when we got to hear more about him and his signature crypt. Turns out Tormod was a minor nobleman living on Dominaria, and he enjoyed a good old-fashioned grave robbing once in a while. A nearby church traced a bunch of missing bodies back to Tormod, and surprise, surprise, he had turned them all into a zombie army. The church and the local peasants were able to defeat the zombies, though, and then they hanged Tormod from a nearby tree, which is kind of dark, even for a story that has its roots in a set literally called The Dark. Anyway, they then put Tormod into a crypt that he himself had created with the help of his zombie laborers, and then his estate was turned over to some distant relatives. A few months later, wouldn't you know it, the grave robbings started again, and the church went back to Tormod Manor only to find it had been abandoned and his crypt was empty. And thus we have Tormod the Desecrator, a zombie wizard, which you could call a lich. He clearly had plans to sidestep his own death, although we don't know what happened after that. I think he'd be perfect to partner up with one of the new familiars. If you give him the Blue Owl, for example, you get access to some terrific supporting cards. There is one final card I want to talk about, and that is because it is probably the most confusing inclusion in all of Commander Legends, and that's the Prismatic Piper. According to the supplied short biography, Magic users all across the multiverse have reported hearing a hauntingly beautiful flute that filled their head with music and granted them the ability to cast spells unlike anything else they had ever done. It goes on to suggest that the Piper is a spirit of pure mana, more pure than even an elemental, and it can exist across all of time and space within the multiverse. And its power could be harnessed by anyone who meets certain unknown criteria. Now, plenty of other cards have been created just for Commander and have never appeared in the story. But if this one ever does, oh boy. This is effectively a get-out-of-jail-free card that now must be handled very carefully. Nissa has already touched on blue and black, but imagine if, during the Zendikar Rising story, while Nahiri was cutting down her elementals, Nissa just started throwing lightning bolts. Or if Jace could have just pacified everybody instead of letting them fight over the lithoform core. I mentioned earlier that colors interacting is good for Magic. Having the white angel be guardian of the green Lanawar forest, that is interesting, but it is still driven by character rather than plot necessity or surprise shock value. Gideon almost drowned in a puddle of dirty water during the battle for Zendikar, and that was a great way to offset his invulnerability. It wasn't going to be damage that killed him because he can't be hurt, but he can run out of air. Imagine if the Prismatic Piper had chosen that moment to intervene. Hello, Gideon. Here's some blue mana for you. You should cast Arcane Adaptation. Now you're a merfolk. Don't let that puddle get you down. Okay, these are extreme examples, yes. But the thought of a lurking Deus Ex Magica out there does unsettle me as a fan of the story. What do you think? Will the Prismatic Piper make an appearance outside of Commander? Let me know down in the comments, and then make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the great stories you'll only find here on Magic Arcanum. We'll see ya.